All right. Well, let's begin. Welcome, Adina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation. So, Adina is, well, I'm gonna introduce you like in my own words, and then you can kind of like add to that yourself. So she is an amazing business and human design and sales expert and coach. I really love your content and your approach to sales. I feel like you have this very non-traditional way of approaching business and kind of like breaking this belief that we have to work hard in order to succeed and like really helping entrepreneurs to like really grow sustainably. So let's see where we end up with our conversation today. But let me know in your own words, like, who are you? What do you do?
This is always a part where I have to be like, do I say something silly or do I stay? Because the line's always very thin for me. Who am I? I'm a girl from the arse end of nowhere in Germany. I grew up in the sticks, and I escaped the watchful eyes of my parents at the tender age of 19 to not go to university and have to choose something for the rest of my life that I didn't know whether I wanted or not. I personally don't believe that anyone at 19 should have to decide what they want to do for the rest of their life, but that's a story for another day. And other than that, who am I? You've just put it very beautifully. That's my professional side. My non-professional side, I love reading romantasy. I'm a huge video game nerd.
Mm, you are? I did not know.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Currently, I mean, my latest conquests were Baldur's Gate 3 and currently Dragon's Dogma 2, so I'm very invested.
Oh my God. That's so exciting. I love to like find out that side about you.
Great. We should play some games sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Was there something else you wanted to tell?
It's always really hard for me to sort of say like, oh well, Adina, who are you? So I'm like, I tried, like, I don't know. This is it.
This is who I am. And yeah,
This is
that's perfect because like obviously that the theme of this podcast side quest is the archetype of the role model and how we are our own role models. And it was so funny because the idea came from an interview I did
yeah.
with a client, and I asked her the question like, who is your role model? And she said like, oh, intuitively, like myself. And then that kind of like spun this like whole thing where I was like, I have to like do a series around it. But really, like, what makes a role model? It's like that we are actually really being ourselves,
Yeah.
like, and like really fully embodying that. And yeah, that actually brings me to a question, like, what does that like mean for you? Like in terms of like your business and like what you do and like also maybe in your personal life, like what does it mean to actually like really be yourself? And like what are like your own values and how are you showing up like in a way that feels really true to you?
What a juicy question. Do you know what? I find it's really funny that one of the hardest things to be, to do, and to express is yourself,
Mm, yeah,
right? Like, shouldn't
yeah.
that like be the easiest thing for all of us? Shouldn't we all find it the easiest way and the easiest thing in the world to breeze through and just allow ourselves to like what we like, to say what we want to say, to be who we are, to express however we want to express ourselves? And yet, it's probably one of the hardest things ever. So when I hear like, okay, well, what does it mean for you to be true to yourself? I think learning to allow yourself to do these things, because there's a lot of societal pressure. Um, and I mean, you and I, we've known each other for a little while, so you know that everything that I'm teaching is very much around like breaking the societal conditioning apart for women, especially this idea of having to identify with, you know, you're a good woman when you're humble and when you put other people first and when you're self-sacrificing and when she's a good girl, right? Men have different sets of societal conditioning. And so it's like, well, is that being true to yourself or not?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess my answer to your question is answered with another question. It's like,
Yes.
what does it mean for me? It's just like, well, I haven't quite figured it out because I'm still learning who I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah. I love that. And yeah, this like actually came up like in another interview that I did, that it's actually like one of the like hardest things to learn, and then to like unwind all of the conditioning that we have, and then actually do that embodiment work of having that capacity and the courage to like be seen more as ourselves. Like it's a huge journey to know yourself. Like I don't know if that is like something we can fully ever do. Like it's like, because like it's an expansive journey, but it's like this discovery of like what is actually true and what
Who am I?
isn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um so tell me a little bit about your story. So you do human design and like belief coaching in your work. Like how did that happen? Like how did that become a part of what you do?
I think the best way that I can start is start a little bit at the beginning for this to make sense, because I've never, and I didn't know that coaching existed until the point that I knew that coaching existed. There's a method to my madness. I'll explain it in a second. But
Okay.
basically, I grew up in the sticks. The little village that I grew up in has like 200 souls, and the next town that's like 10 kilometers away has like 50,000 people, and now half that. Right. So it's
Mm,
tiny. And when you grow up in a bubble like this, which is so separated, like, don't get me wrong, it's not as remote as some like countries like Tibet, or like it's not that remote, but for a country like Germany, it's pretty remote. And when you grow up in this kind of environment where everyone knows everything about you, like, you know, the policeman
mm,
because he's your neighbor and you bring him eggs on a Sunday morning, you know, and if someone like, and you know, the accountant and you know, the person who works in the council, it's very different. It's a very different thing than when you grow up in the city. And so when I went to school, there were certain expectations, and I'm a human design fifth line, but I didn't know that at the time as well.
mm,
So there's like a lot of projection going on. Um, and so there's like this big expectation in the with the people that are around you, because also both of my parents come from the east side of Germany. Like before the wall came down, that was like the communist Soviet side. And so they didn't have a lot. And so typical millennial who just like, oh, well, okay, you have to grow up and education, education, education. It doesn't matter. Like I loved music. I was in a band. I have a vocal degree, played like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to study musical performance, but I was told not to because that doesn't make
mm,
any money. You can have it as a hobby. I was told that go and have a job that makes a lot of money. You don't have to like it, it just has to pay you well. Like you can have your soul destroyed for 8 hours a day. Like the other
mm,
times, like the other hours of your day, you can enjoy your day. That essentially what was being said for me. And then it was quite sat right with me. But me being who I was, I didn't think about my future until I had my exams in the last year of school. I wasn't thinking about it because I'm like,
mm,
oh, I have time. You know, you're young and you don't think about these things. And I was just like, everything else was figured itself out at the time. And I kind of just like skated along my exams, and then when the time came, like I was average in exam because I had huge performance anxiety. I was good at school, was very good at school, but the moment exams came, because I had performance anxiety, like my grades were they were down. And so my grades on like my certificate were average, even though I was actually good at school for most things. And so the things that my parents wanted me to apply for, like your typical like doctor, juror, the police person, like whatever, like anything that sort of, according to them, made a lot of money. I couldn't really get into it because my grades weren't good enough because I was average.
mm,
And so no university would have me. I wasn't, exactly trying really hard either. I'm not gonna lie. Like I wasn't trying hard, and there were other complications, like because back at the time my brother was already studying and he got funding, and that meant that I couldn't get funding anyway. That's a whole other can of beans that I don't need to go into. But basically the point is I didn't go to university. I wasn't angry about it, but my parents were like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to have to find a job. And I'm like, no way. I'm not going to go to another waitressing job because I've already had 3 jobs on a weekend every weekend. I'm like, I'm not going to do waitressing for a year to then wait for my like my life sentence, essentially, which is what it felt like.
Yeah.
So I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna go to Costa Rica and learn Spanish. This will all make sense in a moment, I promise. At this point I still had no idea what I wanted to do, and I'm just like, okay, well, if I move country I can get my parents off my back. And learning another language was a good enough excuse for them, except my mum didn't want me to move to a different continent. So she's like, okay, where's England, Ireland, or nothing? And I'm like, well, one of my old schoolmates lives in Britain, so I'll just go to England. That's literally how I chose. Like, that was how I chose my future. I'm like, putting my finger in the air, I mean, like, which way does the wind blow? And so I went to England, did a year of an au pair. Still had no fucking idea what I was going to do. Still like half-assed, applied for universities. Again, wasn't angry that I couldn't get in. And so I just applied for a waitressing job at Nando's in the UK, serving chicken legs. For like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And to be honest, I enjoyed the job well enough. What I didn't enjoy was the hours, 15-hour days. So eventually someone saw me, my brother's boss saw me. He was just like, Adina, your English is pretty good. And I'm like, thanks. And he was just like, how'd you feel about working for us in sales? Selling IT into the German, Austrian, and Switzerland region. I'm like, yeah, weekends off, hell yeah, sign me up. A salary, no more hourly rates. I thought I won the jackpot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is how I entered into sales. This will all go into how I got into coaching. So eventually figured out 3 months later that I fucking hated the corporate world, because suddenly I had to just take off boxes. Like, how many calls a day did you make? It didn't matter the quality of the calls. It's just like, how many calls a day did I make? It didn't matter that these, like, nobody wanted to hear from us. Like, we were cold calling off an Excel spreadsheet. It didn't matter that they didn't want to hear from us. They were just like, dial for dollars or your job's on the line. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is this madness? Like, we're selling to people who don't want our stuff. Why do you insist? It was just like, well, this person said no. That means you have to go again. And I'm like, what? That is ridiculous. And so anyway, so that's when I started to learn into the sales culture. Eventually, so I stayed in the IT sales industry for 7-8 years. And I moved to different positions. And in that time, I was presented with a book called The 7-Hour Workweek from Tim Ferriss. And I've, at that point, never considered being self-employed. And then I read this guy's book and I was enthralled. I was just like, I can have my own business. He also started out in telesales. This is amazing. I'm like, I'm not alone. Wait, I can do my own business. That's an option. I didn't even know that that was an option for me. So then in the entirety of my time in IT sales, which is where I remained, I started building businesses, and I tried it all, Rosa. I tried everything. I tried copywriting. I tried VA. I tried doing lunch service deliveries. I tried studying game design and becoming a game designer. I have tried being a VA. Like, you name it, I have probably tried starting a business that way, and they all fucking failed. And when I say failed, it's because I also didn't know what I was actually doing. So at some point I'm just like, well, no one's buying after 3 weeks, so I guess this is it. I guess this is a failed business. Now we know better. But at that point, everything I tried didn't work. Bear in mind, I had no formal education in these things either. I was just like, fuck it, I'll just go try. So you see where this is. So eventually I was just like, I'm miserable at my job. I'm really good at sales, but my bosses don't like how I do sales, because we had to do 40 calls a day, 2 hours of call time, and 8 hours of work a day, which sounds like, yeah, it's no big deal. But the thing is just like, again, I don't like speaking to people who don't want to hear from me. I'm a human design
Mm.
projector, like that. And again, fifth line, I'm like,
Mm.
that feels gross to me, but I didn't know human design at the time.
Mm.
And so I did most of my work and always achieve, well, always 2 out of 15 quarters, I think I didn't reach. And that wasn't even my fault that that didn't reach. That was an invoicing problem, right? So I always overachieved in my sales targets, but they didn't like how I achieved them. And so at some point, I'm like, this is a load of fucking bullshit, because my reward for not only achieving my targets and doing it in half the time is more work and a bollocking from you. I'm like, what's wrong with this fucking picture? Like, seriously, what's wrong with this picture? And so eventually I started coming home crying, and I was just like, ugh, how is everyone else okay with this life and soulless existence? And why can't I be okay with it? Like,
Mm.
what is it about me that just isn't like, am I just an ungrateful cow? And
Mm.
and then I saw this YouTube video, I think it's called YouTube on Fire. There's a podcast with a really like if I find it again. Anyway, so Marie Forleo was there and she was talking about coaching. I'm like, what the hell's coaching? Told you there's method to my madness. And she talks about it and she's like, well, there's this thing that you do and you are guiding people. And I'm like, I've been doing this for years. I've always helped everyone else find their potential. I'm like, that's a job. That's a job. That's a thing people get paid for. What the hell? So anyway, so then I was just like, no one at work was safe. I'm just like, right. I just took my colleagues. I'm like, guys, there's this thing that I want to try, but I've never done it. Can I like try coaching you for free? And like, you'll see where this is going. And so my colleagues were allowing me to coach them. And then I realized that life coaching wasn't for me, because everyone just came to me with their dating problems and I just didn't want to hear about it. I couldn't be fucked to hear about. I'm like, have you tried Plenty of Fish, which is like a dating app next to Tinder? I'm like, I don't know. So anyway, then I realized that actually what I'm really, really good at is psychology and sales and getting people into more efficient money making. I was really, really good at that. And so that's how my journey started into sales and coaching and doing these things. So a very long story, but it had to happen that way.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And I think that's really interesting, like the time that you spent in corporate sales. And like we were speaking like before this, kind of like knowing the world of traditional sales and how kind of like icky and forceful it feels. Could you tell like maybe a little bit more about that? Like I know that there are like artists and entrepreneurs like in my audience too, like whom sales can be such a like a scary thing, or like something that feels really um I don't know, off-putting, like for many people like who do something that is something that they are really passionate about, or that feels like their soul's work. So please like enlighten me a little bit about like of your sales philosophy. Like I love talking about sales. It's like one of the weird passions that I have. So share me, like tell.
Love it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. The way that traditional sales is presented is essentially like go and knock on, like I'm gonna really take this, but for most people, and women especially, men not so much, because their traditional upbringing kind of gave them a little bit of a harder skin, but that doesn't mean that they like it either, right? So I don't want to single
Mm.
out the men here, but for a lot of women it feels icky, is because the idea of selling something, even if you're passionate about it, feels like you are taking something away from someone, feels like you are pushing
Mm.
something they don't want onto someone, and it
Mm.
feels like you are like that's what it feels like, and then I explain why in a moment. And it almost feels to a lot of women like uh, they're too big for their breeches, like they're being arrogant, like they're like, who am I to sell this thing? Like if they wanted it, they would just come to me, kind of thing, right? And a lot of that has to do with the way that most women who had a traditional upbringing have been brought up with societal conditioning. Because if we look at what is the traditional idea of a woman, it's very much like she has to be humble, right? To be a good mother, she has to be self-sacrificing. To be a good wife, she has to make sure that the house is clean, and she has to be a good hostess. Like, show me one woman that is at a party and at hosting who's fucking exhausted but still makes sure everyone else has drinks in hands, and she's thirsty, she's tired, she wants everyone out of the fucking house, and she just wants a glass of wine, right? But she's not asking for it because, well, is everyone else okay? And so that's the problem that's kind of presented with sales. The moment you attach money on something, that's when it starts gnawing at this traditional upbringing, because sales is, in a nutshell, sharing something of value with someone else, right? If you go to a nice restaurant and you're like, guys, you really need to go to this restaurant, like, they have amazing food, the experience, you wouldn't bat an eyelid, would you? Right? But that's sales. If you find something on Amazon and you're like, I bought this thing, you have to have it. And then you get someone to buy something on Amazon, somehow, and suddenly money is involved, but that money isn't attached to you yet. That money is attached to Jeff Bezos. So it's still not a problem, right? But the moment money is attached to yourself, for most women, that's when it becomes a problem, because you have these traditional values of, I have to be humble. And in a way, we like identifying with these. Whether we always should is a different question, right? It is, everything is in balance. That's how I see it. It is good to be humble, but it is not good to be so humble that everyone else is more valuable than you.
Yeah.
Right? So suddenly you have these values of, like, you want to be helpful, you want to be of service, you want to be helping other people, and then asking for money. And asking for money feels greedy. Asking for money is just like, well, I want to make money, but so, and now I'm taking money away from another person. I'm just like, right? And that's the thing, that that's what most people feel is the icky part of sales.
Yeah.
And so when we then start to approach traditional sales, that's essentially how it's taught. And I mean, you and I, like you said, we spoke about this beforehand, is traditional sales is really taught. It's like no means yes. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's how I've learned it. It's literally like the amount of sales trainings I've had. And you said it very nicely earlier. What was it? What was the thing that you said earlier that you learned in traditional sales?
That when the client says no, that is when the sales begins.
Right? Like has no one questioned why that's problematic? Like, consent is a thing. And I always compare sales to sex in a way. It's like sales or sex isn't something where one person dictates everything, unless you're into that. We're not kink shaming here. Right? But again, it's consensual. It's consensual domination, right? But again, it's about consent. And so we need to start looking at it from a lens of, how can we stop either putting ourselves beneath someone else or above someone else? And how do we make everyone an equal? Because what is it? If you think about it again with the like restaurant thing, I don't like, and I'm using the restaurant because it's a very low risk example, but it's essentially in essence the same thing. If I tell you about a restaurant that I really enjoyed and I think you would enjoy too because it's of benefit to you, I don't think I'm saying this because I'm better than you. It's because I genuinely want you to have a good fucking experience. And when we start applying that to our businesses, right? Coaching, web design, leadership trade, like any of these things, then suddenly it doesn't become a thing of like, I'm selling you this thing because I want to make money. It becomes a thing of like, I'm selling this thing because I genuinely think it would help you. And money is simply just a way of how we communicate the value, and it doesn't mean anything about me or you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and one of the things that really helped like me kind of like shifting the gears like in my brain was like that it is really like, how can I be in service to something if I am not like holding the value of what I serve? Like it's like about serving the bigger thing. Like it's not
Absolutely.
necessarily so much about me, but what I'm serving and what I'm serving in the people that, you know, I work with, or like with my with my clients, and like sales like is a part of that. And I really love that you kind of like compare it to sex. I always use sex metaphors like because it really works.
It does.
Um yeah, and it's like if you think about like how can we make like sales sexy? Because like, trying to force, a sale and someone is so not sexy. It's not inviting at all. I mean, there's no turn on in that.
Exactly. It's like it's like going on a blind date and immediately saying, "Can I see your boobs?" Like, love, that ain't doing it for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm as dry as a Saharan desert right now. Like, this is not happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you, like, knowing that you use human design, can you like share like how that translates like into sales and like how you approach sales like yourself and like maybe with your clients? Um,
Sure.
yeah.
So, do you talk a lot about human design on this podcast? Or should I just give a very brief overview?
Give a brief overview. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So,
Yeah.
human design, for anyone who doesn't know, is essentially a self-discovery tool. It uses different modalities from astrology, the I Ching, quantum physics, the Kabbalah, and the chakra system, and it combines these things into creating what is essentially an energetic blueprint or an energetic map of what your energetic DNA would look like.
Mm,
We're all aware that as a person, our biological DNA is very different, but we don't act like that also affects how we are as people. And that's why I'm essentially using human design. And the way that human design later falls into sales and business, and to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, pretty much everything, is
mm,
because the way that the world currently works is that we are being taught to trust in authority figures for our well-being and happiness.
mm,
And there is a place for experts, right? Like anything that's logical, like when we talk about investing, when we talk about how does a house need to be built, anything that's
mm,
logical, of course we want to trust in authority figures, but our fulfillment, our happiness, our joy, our pleasure cannot be outsourced to an expert or even someone else. And so when we're being taught, trust in your teachers, trust in your parents to make the right decision for you, trust in the government, trust in like a mentor, a guru, or whatever, like
mm,
our fulfillment cannot be outsourced to these people. And so just because a decision might make sense on paper, it like we all know that we've made decisions that were logical, but they
mm,
left us feeling dead inside. And
mm,
human design teaches us how do we learn to, first of all, be in our bodies, and
mm,
what is our unique energetic decision-making process? How does energy move through us, inside of us? And when we start to understand this, we can start applying this to pretty much everything in our life, in our business, in our pleasure, pretty much everywhere. And the way that I would say it affects sales and business is we have 5 different types in human design. We've got the projector, we've got the generator, we've got the manifesting generator, we've got the manifestor, and we've got the reflector. You don't need to know
mm,
what any of these are right now, but it's in essence, just these types are already giving us a really big clue of how we operate as people, because every one of them have a different aura, right? So if I
mm.
actually have your chart in front of me right now. So you are a
Oh.
manifesting generator.
Yeah.
Yes, you are a manifesting generator, right? So you have something called an inviting aura, like an enveloping aura. And
Mm,
when we start understanding this, whereas I'm a projector, I have something called a penetrating aura. We
mm,
start to look at these things and we start to understand, okay, well, when you as a manifesting generator are your most satisfied, your most joyful, which are your signatures, your most peaceful
mm,
self,
mm,
people can't leave you alone. Everyone wants to know what the hell you're up to, even if you're trying to get away from them. But when you are excited, when you are fulfilled, when you are full, you used this word earlier, when you are full,
yeah.
like opportunities, people, places, things are coming to you to respond to. We can call this manifesting, we can call this attraction. I don't care what you call it, but in essence, it's the same thing. And for me as a projector, it works similar, but in a different way. So I know, for instance, that I can't use the traditional tools for marketing and sales that you as a manifesting generator could use, for instance, because I need to be invited and recognized first for my wisdom. So whereas you technically, depending on what you respond to, could technically cold call and cold DM someone if it feels right for you in the moment. That never works for me unless I feel successful first and I'm completely detached from the outcome. And even then it's likely to fail because of the way the aura mechanics works. And it's it's already very deep human design, so I don't even want to spend too much time on this. But let's say when we start to understand what our type is, or when we start to understand what our authority is and what our profiles are, so like the top 3 and the top 4, essentially, what you want to know is you want to know your type, you want to know your strategy, which is attached to the type. You want to know your profile. I always think that that's vastly overlooked. The profile is so important. And then you want to look at your incarnation cross, like your conscious sun, which you can find pretty much anywhere in the keynotes on your chart. And so when you start looking at this, for instance, you start to understand you are a 4-6 profile. When I look at yours, you're a 4-6 profile. 4th lines are the opportunists. Like, you guys prefer having word of mouth and having personal interactions. The social media aspect, a lot of the time for 4th lines, often can feel a little bit stale. Where most of your opportunities come from is literally from in-person contact, whether that's on a Zoom call or an actual networking, but it has to be like ride or die people, not the shallow networking pitch fest that you go. It's literally ride or die. There's not one 4th line I know that has more success with social media than they do with actual networking with their people. I don't know if that resonates with you.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah,
so
totally.
For me, I'm a 5-1 profile. For me, it can be a little bit of both. So 5th lines, 5th and 4th lines are always really cool because 4th lines essentially make like best friends with people. Right? Like, you guys become best friends. Like, it's also very common for 4th lines to become friends with their clients. Whereas 5th lines, that can also happen with me. I've got a few 4th line profiles in my actual chart, but 5th lines, we work very well with strangers, right? Because we're here to sort of see the potential in the masses. You're here to generate opportunities between your immediate network. Like, imagine if you knew that already, and that's only 2 out of the 6 profiles. Imagine if you knew that already, how that would affect your sales. You can stop trying to have a huge social media presence or forcing it and start spending a lot more time with your immediate network and actually gaining opportunities that way. It just stops wasting a lot of time because there's a lot of information out on the internet that says, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And it's not that these things are wrong. It's just, if you don't know whether they're correct for you, then you end up wasting a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's really about like, is it aligned for you? Like, because like, obviously, like, something that works for someone else, like, it doesn't necessarily work for like somebody else.
Exactly.
And that's like where I really love human design, that it's so much about that individuality and like the uniqueness of everyone, like looking at the person, like, what do you uniquely need and how do you uniquely operate, that it's not like this is the formula of like how to sell or like how to sing or whatever, but it's like really finding that the way that everyone uniquely thrives.
And isn't it, I love that you said that, but like, if we also logically think about it, right? Like, these, like, I'm on a warpath with like these, like, follow the 3-step formula. I'm on like a fucking warpath with it. But it's this whole thing, like, if we really think about it, if there was one formula to rule them all, if there was like the one Lord of the Rings ring, right? There's just like that to rule them all, we'd all be buying from that one person and we'd all be doing that one thing. evidently no one's figured it out for the masses yet. So what does that tell us?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, I've been experimenting a lot like with my own human design, like also in my business. And it's actually really funny because I've definitely been working with my profile in the last year or so, and like with the 4 aspect. And I so recognize that what you said about like having those like close connections and like the immediate network. Like I feel like if I went viral and my audience was all about like just having strangers like that I have like no connection with, like that feels like in my system. I'm like, like I don't know, like that feels weird. It's it feels so off. But I do recognize that sometimes that has been like something that I thought that maybe I need to, like maybe this is what success looks like. I need to achieve that. Like maybe I need to have like a big audience or like a big following, but that would actually just like dilute, the potency of my work.
It would. And what I
Yeah.
also think is really cool, is that like the reason for the podcast that you mentioned earlier is like, what does it mean to be a role model for you? I mean, you literally have role model in your profile, right? Line 6. You are the role
Yeah.
model. So I'm like, I always love how the keynotes of someone's chart, like you don't have to know your human design. You will always embody them no matter what. It's just, are you more efficient and at embodying them, or are you resisting it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, are you fighting your own design?
Yeah.
Like, because like there is nothing that your human design can tell you that we don't know already about ourselves. I think it's all like it's so much about that recognition. Like really.
It's the permission about I always say that in people's readings when I do them. I'm just like, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. What I'm hoping is that you
Yeah.
now allow yourself to be who you are,
Yeah.
right? So rather than making yourself wrong for what you're not. So
Yeah.
me as a projector, the way that I got into human design, I was in
Mm.
this big mentoring group. I say big mentoring group. It was like a mastermind. I think we were 20 people together, and I paid a lot of money for it. And I was the perfect student, as projectors are. We're here to master systems. We're here to be efficient, right?
Yeah.
And I was the perfect student, but I actually had less success than I did before I started with the program.
Mm.
And by the end of it, like in the last month, I'm just like, look, I'm doing everything that you're saying I should be doing. Like,
Mm.
it's not working. And the thing is, like, you could tell in the video, she's like, no, I can see that. She couldn't argue with me. She's like, no, I can see
Mm.
that you're doing everything. And she's like, well, try human design. Do you know what your human design is? I've never even heard of it. And she's like, go do the thing and then tell me what you are. And I'm like, I'm a projector. And she's just like, well, of course this isn't working for you. And I'm like, you tell me now. And that's because the way that traditional sales work, it's for projectors with the way that it works, because with the newest type, it's something entirely different. And so when we start knowing these things, like for you,
Mm.
having the understanding that you don't need to go down and deep and dirty into every detail because you're here to find shortcuts, right? Whereas the pure
Mm.
generators are here to go like really deep down, dirty and niche, like really niche, and become masters. Like so many manifests. I have a lot of manifesting generators in my orbit. And
Yeah.
all of them give themselves a hard time for like, oh, but I'd like maybe I need another certificate because I don't think I know enough. I'm like, you're not here. You're here to skip steps so that we can
Yeah.
get to the solution faster. You're here to show us the
Yeah.
fastest way to success so we can go do the other thing you also offer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the permission piece that is so, I think it's so liberating. And that is also like why I love it, like using it with expression, is that sometimes we can use so much effort and energy in trying to be something that we are not, because like we have learned these like value and belief systems like from outside. And I have definitely noticed like embodying more of my design and like especially my authority, like having a sacral authority, there's like this piece of like, can I allow it to be so easy and juicy?
Yes,
And like I'm like, oh my god, like this feels like I have to like almost like this has to be harder so that people don't get angry at me, or
yes.
I don't feel guilty, that I'm just like I'm just having a good time and I'm turned on.
Oh my God. It's probably one of my favorite beliefs to work on when I get to work with people, this whole like, at first they're just like, oh, why isn't it working for me? And what do I need to do? And I'm a failure. But when we break through that and they start making the money and things are easy, it's just like, I feel like I'm cheating. Right? This
Yeah.
is almost too easy. And I'm like, oh yeah, baby. I love that belief. Right? Because then it's about, okay, now I have to work harder so that I feel that I deserve the success that I'm having. And it's just like, well, it's not about working harder.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like have had that. Uh, it's a tough one. Or maybe it's not a tough one, but I'm
Go on, I want to
Uh,
hear it now.
I'm almost like thinking like, is there like this weird like satisfaction that I kind of like get out of like making it harder than it actually is? It feels sensational. Like if I just feel it like in my body right now, it feels sensational to be like, ooh, just like if I just let it feel really easy, like follow my response, like it's just like,
That's because the
yeah.
body, like the brain loves comfort, right? Like
Mm,
the just and when I say comfort, comfort in the terms of comfort equals what it knows, because
yeah.
that's safety. And just because something is comfortable or uncomfortable rather, as long as it's familiar, it will always
Yeah.
put you back down again. And so the working hard feels familiar because you know what to expect. You know that as long as you work hard, even though it's not always comfortable is probably the wrong word. Again, familiar is the better word. Even though it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, it's familiar, which means it is safe. And so if you work hard and you overwork yourself, even though you're tired and it gives you health issues, every once in a while you get a client. Every once in a while you can express yourself. Every once in a while you're
Mm,
happy, right? But it's familiar.
mm,
But now you allow yourself to be easy. And then you feel like, yeah, but what if it all gets taken away? And so your brain's
yeah.
just like, well, let's not get you to the point where it gets taken away so you'll die. Let's get you to the
Mm,
point where it's uncomfortable again, but familiar.
yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I had something come up from that, and then I heard my dishwasher machine. Oh, oh yeah, now I remember. It's like, um, yeah, like what I've noticed, like working with this, like in my own body, that there is like this, like it feels like this very primal fear around what if I let go of working hard, and what if I like it feels scary like on some level, like it's like almost like letting go of these bars that I've been holding on to, like I'm working so hard and like I'm in control, like what if I let go? Yeah, it's like a survival thing.
It
That's
is.
what it feels like.
That
Yeah.
is that, and you are absolutely correct. It is a survival thing because if you think about it, we think we're so smart as human beings. We think we've got it all figured out and we're so logical, but 98% of our entire decision making is based on instinct and is based on the primal part of our brain that doesn't
Mm,
use logic, right? And so that part of our brain is designed to keep us alive and breathing as long as possible. Whether that means that we have a scrape here or there. Like if you're sleep deprived, you're still alive. So it's just like we'll take sleep deprivation over death anytime. Right? And
mm,
it sounds very dramatic when I say it that way, but that is the way of things go, right? Because when you allow it to be easy, then what if that means you lose your house? And what if that means that everyone hates you? And what if that means you end up all alone? And what if that means that you end up on the street and you have no clients whatsoever? Then
mm,
you'll die homeless all alone, right? That's literally, and
yeah.
your brain has this meeting. You never consciously think about this. It has this secret meeting. You don't fucking know about it. And it immediately goes, there's this new thing. We don't know what the outcome will be. You're probably homeless alone and you'll die.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, no, so we'll sabotage us. So keep holding on to those bars because at least this cage is safe.
Yeah. Because it's familiar, like, and I know how to
Navigate.
survive here.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so funny, like how much our like our body and our brain like can almost like fight against like expansion, like or maybe it's a fight. It's not. It's not the right word.
Well, it fights for survival. Because again, if
Yeah.
you think about it, anything that we haven't achieved yet
Mm.
is an unknown.
Mm.
Right? By its definition, a goal is something we haven't got yet, right? So if the goal is, for instance, I want to own a fucking yacht and I want to have my pilot license, that's something that I haven't got yet. By its definition, it's unfamiliar, uncharted territory, therefore it's dangerous, right? I'm
Yeah.
oversimplifying things here. There are people who are way smarter than me who can tell this much better. But in its oversimplification, it's just like, well, let's not take any risks because this could spell potential death. And so let's keep you here. And so we are going to do everything in your power, in our
Mm.
power, to keep you there. And if that means telling you to focus on all the things that are going wrong, telling you to focus on how people don't like you, telling you to focus on how your dishwasher is breaking right now, telling you to procrastinate so that you don't go do this thing, then
Mm.
we will do that because it means we're distracting you from running into your potential demise.
Mm. Yeah. And this makes me really think about like how, well, this is at least like how I view it. I feel like as human beings, like we're like evolving like from this place of like living out of survival, like into like maybe it's thriving, or like I don't know what is the best word for it, but because like we've had like for hundreds of years, like we maybe needed that, like we maybe needed to be in survival mode and this like very tribal of like I need to belong, um so that I feel safe and so that I survive, because sometimes like not belonging, it actually meant death, and that's still
Absolutely.
in our body. But like we're at this point where we are like as humans, like we're ready to evolve like into a different way of living, like out of survival. Yeah. I don't know how you like perceive that. And
I would say I echo that 100%. And also, if we're going back to sort of like the human design aspect of it, we've been in the what we call the cross of planning, the incarnation cross
yeah.
of planning for I think 150 years. Don't quote me on that. Like it's been a while. We've been in there
Yeah.
for a while. And basically the cross of planning has given us the energy to logically think about what needs to happen for us to be stable as a society. And so if you think about like 150 years, 200 years, like a lot has happened, right?
Mm.
We've gone from industrial revolution to building cars to having technologies. I mean, even just the last 30 years have advanced us massively in technology, right? So we've gone from
Mm.
having no cell phones, right? So I still, when I was young, my nan had a little radial phone, you know, the old ones, and now we've got tablets and we're online everywhere. And in 2027, so in the next 3 years, we are moving into something called the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is all about, so we go from logic and thinking to feeling. That's what the cross of the sleeping phoenix is
Mm.
about.
Yeah.
And you can start to already see that that's kind of happening when we go into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is all about emotions. It sits like where the root and the solar plexus are.
Mm.
It's all about feeling, all about embodying. And you can tell that the cross of planning is currently slowly falling away because like more and more of like new age science emerges, more and more of like
Mm.
embodiment
Mm.
work emerges, but we're still not quite sure what to do with that yet because we're still trying to hold on. Yes,
Mm.
but we've done thinking for the last 200 years,
Yeah.
right? Like what do you mean? Like this has kept us alive for the longest time. What do you mean we should feel now? And again,
Yeah.
human brain versus the human body.
Yeah. Exactly. And it feels like this old way of like trying to force things or just like logically problem solve like out of this like survival state, like it just won't work anymore. Like at least like I noticed like in myself, I'm like if I try to do things like in that like kind of like my old way, it's
Yeah.
just like it just won't work. Like the universe will not give me like shit.
And it doesn't, right? That's the thing. Like if you try to logic your way and force your way into something that's against your design, right? Against responding, or you're responding to the wrong thing, shit just falls apart.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, why am I doing this when there's an easier way? And yes, it's scary because again, it's unknown, but it's so easy and so delicious and so juicy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I'm like I'm loving this.
Same.
This yeah. So oh, okay. I'm like thinking what do I want to ask you next? Let's see. It's like one of the things that really comes up like from this conversation and like from this theme, I feel like there is this um like I feel like a lot of permission like from your work, and I think for like many people like entrepreneurs and um like people creating their own livelihoods, like there is this way that you being yourself and like you doing your work in what you do like carries a lot of permission for people and to like really um like embody like a new way of doing sales, and that also like that has a big impact like on our lives, because like if you're able to do sales in a way that like feels really aligned and true to you, like what is the impact of that like on our lives and on the lives of our families, and you know the legacy that we create. So it's like yeah, like we are obviously we are like change makers and you know rule breakers like all in our own ways, but that is like what I'm very much like receiving from this conversation, like one of the things that like you bring into the field and the conversation, like just like
Absolutely.
collectively. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a, I'm going to call it naive, but I don't think it should be naive. There's a very naive hope in me that when I get to teach, like I market sales, right? Like I market sales, I market business scaling, but obviously that's not the only thing that I'm doing with people. I work on their beliefs, I work on their self-worth, I work on the fact that how can you empathetically allow a person to step into your space without bulldozing them and without being bulldozed, right? Like it goes way beyond sales what I'm doing. But in order for me to be heard by people, and in order for people to be like, yeah, this is the thing I need to obviously speak to what they think they need, which is ultimately called marketing, right? But there's this naive hope that I have that when I get to teach this and when I get to showcase this, and everyone who works with me, and I mean, you know this for yourself to be true since you've seen both sides. When you allow that to happen, it's no longer selling.
Mm.
It's no longer a thing of like you almost are, right? Because all
Mm.
you are doing is you
Mm.
are just embodying that version of yourself that you're here to be anyway, whether that is you are building systems for people, whether that is you're showcasing how people can use their voice to express themselves, whether that is me seeing someone's people potential and triggering the fuck out of them so that they can step into their, like, just literally like the incarnation cross of individuality, right? Like that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is that you're here to do is it stops being about sales, and the moment you can be that
Mm.
highest version of yourself, you almost allow other people to give themselves permission, and suddenly you have like this little spider web of everyone just being.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, I don't want it to be a naive hope, but it is a naive hope at the moment, because I'm like, well, it's a grand concept where like the traditional world would be like, Adina, stop being ridiculous. And I'm like, no, I think we need to be ridiculous. We need to stop
Yeah.
seeing these things as like putting them in boxes by saying like marketing and sales. I think we need to start looking at it as just like, okay, well, how can I be of service to the world by embodying my
Mm.
highest version of myself? Because I know I'm not for everyone. You know, you're not for everyone, but the right
Mm.
people will come and the right people will influence those people. And then if everyone is the highest version of themselves, if everyone feels safe embodying themselves and lets everyone else embody their own truest self,
Mm.
or suddenly we have a kind world. And is that such a bad thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that is a big shift, like from kind of like moving from that that my value isn't like what I do or how much I do or how hard I do things, like to like
Exactly.
what I am and who I am, like, and from that place of being, I really resonate with that a lot. And I think there is a way that like the more we do that like unwinding work and like just like embodying like more of like everyone's own like essence and frequency and design, it's like people can actually feel us. And I think there is a way that like the old kind of like performative and manipulative and like forceful way of doing sales, it's just like at some point I don't think it's going to work anymore, because like people can see through it. And just like um I think people are also somehow like getting tired of it, that at some point I don't know if it's going to work so well anymore, like in the future.
Well, that and the internet, I mean, everything, right? Every tool that we have depends on the user. Like a tool
Yeah.
itself is never bad, right? So, but the
Mm.
internet is a really beautiful tool where it can be used to spread a lot of bullshit, which it is used for, or it can be used to spread a lot of awareness, right? And so I think
Mm.
it's because of the access to so much information that we can see, right? Whereas before the internet, all the access to like how is business done and how is sales done was like the local shops, right? And so
Mm.
you only know what you know by experiencing it. And so now you can experience almost too much in a way. And so I
Mm.
think that's why people get tired, because they're like, now it's not only the local butcher or the local pen shop that does it to me. Now it's also like, now it's worldwide butchers, worldwide pen shops, worldwide like salespeople. And so we're like overloaded with this information. So it's not like people getting tired of it because it's wrong. It's more like it's too much. And so we need to find a better way, because there's only going to be more people
Yeah.
as the time passes.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah, I'm almost like seeing this like this like funny visual of like, it's like when you kind of like follow your own design, like things in the way that it's true to you, like it allows the right people to magnetize, and kind of like trusting that the resources will come, and like we all are meant to like magnetize certain people. We're not supposed to be for everyone, and almost like like this kind of like everyone gets to be magnetized to their own people, and it's just
Yes.
like there is no like lack in that.
There is no like, you're so right.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, if we think about it, how can there be lack, right?
Yeah.
We have a whole planet
Mhm.
that is full of water, full of people, full of resources. The only reason that there's lack is because we start building borders and because we start decide to distribute some more to the others. But really, and again, very utopian fantasy, but if we started removing like who said this? Was it Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, said this. I love
Hmm.
him. He said he was asked once about whether he believes in aliens, and he was just like, he couldn't quite answer it, but he says, well, I think if aliens did exist, I think they'd be questioning why we live as a species on this one planet and we need a paper to cross to another part of the planet, or why we need or why we are hoarding resources and not giving it to the entire planet. And that always
Hmm.
stuck with me, because yeah, if we think about it, if we think about the idea of the concept that there's more life out there in the universe, would we expect them on that same planet to do what we do and segregate our species, or would we have allow that abundance to shine through? There is no
Hmm.
lack.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so much like how we perceive things, and like our belief systems, and the systems that we have
100%.
built. Yeah. Oh. Oh, we
I
went
get quite
we went
philosophical.
wide. I love to get philosophical. But I'm just like, oh, we went wide.
Yes, I love it.
And now I want to ask you the million dollar question. So how are you your own role model?
By continuing to work on what I'm trying to show other people. So I'm going to go back into the lens of human design because I think it gives quite a measurable way of sharing that. As per my design, as a 5/1 projector with the incarnation cross of individuality, my entire purpose is, and I feel this, like even before I knew human design, I knew this to be true, was seeing people's potential and helping them step into their own version of abundance. And while I share this with other people, I also need to apply this. And I can say this so easily now because it's very easy for me to do this for other people, but taking my own medicine is a really bitter pill to swallow. A really bitter pill to swallow. It is very easy for me to go and say, Rosa, look, your potential lies here, and here's where you can do the sales, and here's where your offers are so valuable. Like, don't you see? But the moment it applies to me, I'm like, but what if my offers aren't good enough? What if I'm a failure? What if I'm a fraud? What if, right? And so, like, the way that I am my own role model is by also embodying what I teach into my own life, even though it's fucking hard sometimes.
It is. But it's like how would it be like our own medicine if we didn't have to, taste it ourselves? Like how on earth could we actually serve it if we didn't know
With
how
a
to actually
spoonful of sugar.
Yeah. With a little bit of chili in it, like maybe.
Whatever you need, with a spoonful of sugar. Where's Mary? We need her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's in answer to your question. I think that's how I'm my own because I know that when I give myself the biggest permission to be myself, and that's really hard for anyone else. Everyone has their own challenges. Like I'm not sitting here and saying like, oh, fifth lines have it so hard. Like you 6 lines, you sometimes like like you guys, everyone does. Everyone has their challenges, right? But as a fifth line, this whole projection field, it does feel really hard because navigating around these projections means that anyone with a fifth line needs to have bulletproof self-worth more than anyone else. And that can sometimes be really hard to do when, again, the only person you're really speaking to in your head, and depending on what you feel like in the moment, right? If you think that you're not good enough, or if you think that you are, depending on what mood you're in, you're right. And so really allowing myself to let that be okay, because I have a lot of if you ever get a look at my chart, I have a lot of fight, provocation, and shock in my, like a lot, like 8 or 9 times on my chart, like fight, provocation, and shock. Like I provoke the shit out of people. And I can feel that. And so my work is a lot of the time to allow that provocation to shine through and not be alarmed when someone doesn't like me for it. Again, traditional upbringing of women, it's like, oh no, I can't be disliked by someone because that means that I'm not a good enough woman, right? So again, it's like navigating all is fluid. It doesn't end.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Oh yeah. That provocation,
It's real.
it's real.
It's real.
And yeah, I think it's one of those also one of those gates in kind of like being in service is that acceptance for people to have their own experience, because like obviously we have no control like around people projecting or being triggered, and sometimes sometimes that is like what people need, like sometimes that is what their soul needs, to like have that trigger like from someone, because it like brings up that agitation of like something that like needs to move. But to like have that sort of like self-worth and also that, I don't know, how would you call it, that like grounding, like like into your service
Mm.
to not like contract because of that. Yeah.
It's hard. And I mean, you know, human design enough. So gate 39, the gate of provocation, is
Mm.
literally in my conscious sun. It's
Oh.
like
Oh.
it's a lot. Like it's a lot. And then I have the 39 and the 55, like 7 or 8 times defined. Like it's a lot. Like provoking is 70% of my entire life. And I don't have to do anything. I just, like, sometimes people just see me. And I had a podcast episode recently where I spoke about this. How do I perceive the 39? It's like, it's really funny because I step into a room and people have an opinion of me. Fifth line, right? They're just like, I like her or I don't like her. I'm like, you don't even know me. You
Yeah.
don't even know me, and yet you already have an opinion, but that's your fifth line, right? But because the 39, the 51,
Mm.
which is the shock, and then the 38, which is the fight, like I have a lot of it, people sometimes feel this like energetic tension. And so what can sometimes happen is that they then start arguing with me, and I'm like, I've literally not even opened my mouth. Or
Mm.
if their spirit is in my right trajectory, right, which is again human design, like if their spirit is ready to be provoked into abundance, then they completely like me, right? And so it's always like a huge polarity. It's never just in between. It's always
Yeah.
like one or the other. And so when you start knowing this, right, how
Mm.
do you show up online? Like, for instance, sales didn't work for me, to go back to our earlier conversation. Sales didn't work for me when I was trying to be provocative or when I was trying to dumb
Mm.
myself down. I just had to allow things
Mm.
to come up, and people get triggered whatsoever. So I may as well just give them a show and just be myself.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't have to do it like separately. It's just like when you are, it just happens.
It just happens. People are either
Yeah.
going to like or not like what I dish out, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I may as well just enjoy the ride and feel successful along the way, and allow the
Mm.
people who are ready to follow into whatever their potential is and allow me to guide them, let me guide them, right? But I can't make anyone do any of these things. And so the
Yeah.
only thing I can do is allow myself to be my best self, which again, I can be my own role model so that other people can allow themselves to be a role model.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I also have, I think I have 39 or 38.
Both.
Both. I have both.
Yeah. You have both. You've got the 39 in your Jupiter, so your blessings lie in your provocation. And where have you got your
Oh. Oh.
Venus, oh hell. Venus, Saturn, Neptune, and unconscious Neptune is your fight. So you also have quite a little bit of fight in you.
Oh. But that's funny that it's in the unconscious. It's not something that I have like consciously access to. It's just like something that
It's
is.
both conscious and unconscious.
Ah. Oh, I didn't remember that. Yeah. Oh. Oh.
But it's about like, right, what is worth fighting for? Or sometimes we pick fights for no
Mm.
reason, right? Sometimes,
Yeah.
and I know that to be true for myself. Like sometimes if I'm in the mood to fight, I just need to let go of some steam. Like it's either fighting with someone or fighting for a cause. And do I know when the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely noticed that energetic for myself. And especially like having had like a lot of like this like rebellious energy like when I was younger. And I feel like there have been seasons where I've really wanted to also provoke
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it has been intentional. Like, look at me, like doing something that you're going to get so annoyed by.
Right? Like sometimes you do it intentionally and it's actually wonderful, but when you do it to get like when you do it to get a rise out of someone, or when you do it just to sort of because you see their potential, are two very different things.
Mm,
Right? And we
yeah,
can do both. Like with the 39, we can do both. We can either be like, well, I'm just going to provoke the shit out of you, just like, what are you going to do? Or we can be
yeah,
like, I'm going to push here because I know you can go there.
yeah, yeah. And there's something that came up earlier when you were talking about, like, I think you said about provoking into abundance or something like that
Mm-hmm.
in those words. And I think that is sometimes like what we need in order to like almost like get through the crust or the shell to our like liberation or transformation, is that sometimes we need that provocation, that kind of like it just creates a crack like in the shell so that there is enough energy for like kind of like our own belief systems to go like, oh wait, wow, like this is maybe not like real, or maybe this is like this is outdated, or like maybe I don't need this anymore. Like we sort of like need that energy. It's not always comfortable to like go like through like all the like to go through that experience.
What never is, no growth is. The best example that I can always give is the gym, right? If you want to grow a muscle, you have to break it first.
Yeah.
Over and over. And I think that's what the energy of that provocation feels like, is if you're not ready to go to the gym, but you want to have the body, well, then you're not like, clearly you're more comfortable holding on to your current status quo than wanting the thing. And so sometimes you need a little bit of provocation to be like, are you sure you want to stay here? It's not gonna be comfortable going here, but you're gonna be loving what comes out at the other end. You're gonna love, right? And so that's, I think, that's what I always describe it as, is growth is always going to be a little bit, even when you were little, like growing pains, when your bones are growing, when your teeth are growing, like it's, growth is painful. Well, uncomfortable. It doesn't always have to be painful, right? Like pain and suffering isn't part of human design, but struggle is, and we need to struggle through something to gain enlightenment, abundance, joy, whatever it is that we're looking for.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much here.
There is.
But yeah, something that I want to kind of like bring together like from this is like, especially like looking at the human design piece and like paired with the belief work, is that sort of like just embodying that permission that there's like almost like like there is nothing wrong in like who we are naturally, that it's actually perfect. And like that is one of the big themes like in this podcast quest, is kind of like seeing that like the perfection like of our journey, like no matter like what the trials and challenges that we have gone through, but almost like the perfection of like all of it, but also the perfection of like who we are like innately, like no matter what, you know, society has taught us that we should be different, but that it's actually exactly perfect because it's like it's in our design and it has its purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. I think this is a good one to end our little conversation. Do you want to share where people can find out more about you if they are curious, seeing what you're doing and what you offer?
Of course. So the place I hang out the most is Instagram at Adina Kroll, literally my whole name. My website also, if you want to see what's on offer, adinakroll.com. So the same thing. Those are the places that I hang out the most, which is where you can find me a lot of the time. So yeah, hit me up, send me a message. I'm very friendly. So just chat with me. I love chatting with people.
Yeah. Go check Adina out. And thank you so much for coming and having a chat with me.
Thanks for having me. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, this is fun. Okay, let's say our bye-byes to the listeners. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.